United Arab Emirates, which is UAE, is a country in the eastern part of the Arabian Peninsula located on the southeastern coast of the Persian Gulf and the northwestern coast of the Gulf of Oman. On 2 December 1971, UAE was declared as an independent, sovereign and federal state. Next, each emirate is governed by a SHAH, and together they form the Federal Supreme Council. One of them served as President of the United Arab Emirates, which is now His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan. As of 2020, UAE has an estimated population of roughly 9.9 million, while the GDP nominal of this country is $410.06 billion. Approximately 30% of the country's gross domestic product is derived directly from the production of oil and gas. Before oil was found in the middle of the 20th century, the United Arab Emirates economy was mostly based on fishing, seafaring, and the pearl trade. As soon as oil production and export began in the 1960s, the economy of UAE changed significantly. Apart from that, here are the list of export and import of UAE. The top export of UAE are crude petroleum, refined petroleum, gold, jewelry, and also broadcasting equipment. While for the top import are gold, broadcasting equipment, jewelry, refined petroleum, and also diamonds. Well, for the currency, the Emirati dirham is the official currency of UAE, abbreviated officially as AED. In 1973, United Arab Emirates dirham replaced the Dubai Rial and the Qatar Rial. Since 1997, the dirham has been pegged to the US dollar at the rate of 1 USD equal to 3.6725 AED, and since then the currency is fixed until 2020. This exchange rate regime has enabled the UAE to reduce the volatility of its earnings. Its main UAE government can reduce the volatility of its export by pegging its currency to the dollar. Additionally, the fixed exchange rate has enabled the country to enhance investor confidence by eliminating exchange rate risk.
Here are the factors that affecting exchange rate of United Arab Emirates, such as GDP per capita, trade balance, foreign direct investment inflow, and OPEC oil price.
Firstly, based on the descriptive statistic, it has 20 sets of data that come from annual data for 20 years, which started from 2001 until 2020. This data use mean as a standard measure. Exchange rate shows the value of UAE dirham on the average of 3.671625 for every US dollar. As for gross domestic product per capita, the mean for 20 years is 38,639.51637. Next, the trade balance shows the average for 20 years is 65,581,400,000. Furthermore, as for foreign direct investment inflow, the mean for over 20 years is 8,928,145,928. And lastly, the mean for OPEC oil price is 63.0860.
The correlation is a statistical measure of the strength of the relationship between the relative movements of two variables. The values range between -1.0 and 1.0. A correlation of -1.0 shows a perfect negative correlation, while a correlation of 1.0 shows a perfect positive correlation. A correlation of 0.0 shows no linear relationship at all. Now, let me explain the correlation analysis table. First, the correlation for exchange rate with the gross domestic product per capita is weak negative relationship with trade balance and foreign direct investment inflow, and weak positive relationship with OPEC oil price. Next, there are moderate positive relationships with trade balance, foreign direct investment inflow, and OPEC oil price for gross domestic product per capita. Then, there is a moderate positive relationship between foreign direct investment inflow and OPEC oil price for the trade balance. Lastly, there is a weak positive relationship with OPEC oil price for foreign direct investment inflow.
Next, as for the model summary, the R-square value is 0.741, which shows that 74.1% of the variation exchange rate variability is explained by OPEC oil price, foreign direct investment inflow, trade balance, and gross domestic per capita. Therefore, the adjusted R-square is 0.672, which shows that 67.2% of the variation exchange rate variability, since the dependent variable is likely explained by independent variable. This ANOVA table indicates the regression with the sum of square is 0.00002107. Next, as for residual, the sum of square is 0.00000737. Therefore, the total is 0.00002844. Furthermore, the differential of regression is 4, while residual is 15, so the total is 19. And lastly, the mean square of regression is 0.00000527 and residual is 0.00000491.
Next is the coefficient. The coefficient for gross domestic product per capita and foreign direct investment inflow is not statistically significant at the 0.05 level since the p-value is greater than 0.05. Thus, this means accepting the null hypothesis and rejecting the alternative hypothesis. Therefore, there is no significant relationship between gross domestic product per capita and foreign direct investment inflow with the exchange rate. Meanwhile, the coefficient for trade balance and OPEC oil price is statistically significant because its p-value is 0.000, smaller than the usual significant level of 0.05. Thus, this means rejecting the null hypothesis and accepting the alternative hypothesis. Therefore, there is a relationship between trade balance and OPEC oil price with the exchange rate of the UAE.
To summarize the findings of this study, there are 4 factors influencing the exchange rate of the United Arab Emirates against the US dollar, such as GDP per capita, trade balance, foreign direct investment inflow, and OPEC oil price. However, multiple regression studies found that trade balance and OPEC oil price had a significant impact on the UAE exchange rate. That is, they have a strong relationship with the dependent variable, which is the exchange rate. Meanwhile, GDP per capita and foreign direct investment inflows have insignificant effects on the exchange rate since the level of the significance are existent but are not strong. In this analysis, we determined that the pledged exchange rate to the US dollar is not an acceptable regime for the UAE since it has been shown to have a negative impact on the UAE economy.